People said Miss Aurelia Beaumont had hair as perfect as spun gold and a heart as sharp as broken glass. She was the kind of plantation mistress who smiled only when someone else was crying. She was the kind who believed cruelty was a form of fun and embarrassment was a form of discipline. And the girl she loved to torment most was Laya. Laya was small, quick, 17 years old, with thick coils of cloud-black hair that Aurelia envied with a poisonous quiet fury. Laya's hair was her mother's last gift to her, a crown she protected with careful braids and whispered prayers. But Aurelia saw it as something else, a reminder that beauty could bloom even in the soil of slavery, outside her control. So one humid night, after a dinner party filled with laughter and wine, Aurelia decided to amuse her guests. She dragged Laya by her braids into the parlor, and with the sharp silver scissors she used for cutting lace, she cut off every curl from the girl's head while the room clapped and jeered. Laya did not cry. She only watched Aurelia with an expression so calm it unsettled even those who cheered the loudest. And before the candles were blown out, every guest in that room had heard the same whisper. Hair grows back, but curses grow teeth. By dawn, Laya's head would not be the only one stripped bare. The night it happened, thunder crawled along the horizon like a warning that no one listened to. Inside the Beaumont mansion, the parlor glowed with candlelight, and laughter from white guests rolled like waves over the sound of Laya's pounding heart. She stood in the corner, hands clasped, trying to appear invisible. Aurelia had told her to serve wine tonight, but Aurelia's true intentions always hid beneath silk and jewels. Laya knew that look in the mistress's eyes, the look of a cat deciding which bird to pluck apart. Aurelia lifted her glass, glittering rings catching the light. "Laya," she said sweetly, "come here, child." Laya walked forward, steps small and careful. The air smelled of tobacco, perfume, and danger. One of the guests, a thick-necked man with a red face, laughed. "Bring that pretty little thing closer. Let's see her hair. It ain't natural for it to look that thick." Aurelia's smile sharpened. "Oh, it's natural all right. She tends it as if it were some sort of treasure." Her voice dipped into mockery. "Doesn't she think herself lovely?" There was murmured laughter. Laya's stomach twisted. Aurelia reached out and tugged one of Laya's braids, not gently. "Tell them, girl. Tell them how long you spent fussing over this mop." Laya forced her voice steady. "Only what's needed, ma'am." "Oh, and who gave you permission to decide what's needed?" Aurelia's eyes glittered. "It's unbecoming for a slave to have pride in anything she owns, especially hair." The guests chuckled, nodding in agreement. Aurelia leaned closer, so close Laya felt her breath. "Do you think you're beautiful, Laya?" "No, ma'am." "Liar." The scissors appeared as if conjured, silver, slender, gleaming wickedly under the chandelier. There was a ripple in the room, a mix of excitement and cruelty. Aurelia held the scissors up. "Tonight, we will teach her humility." Laya didn't move. She didn't breathe. Something deep inside her, older than fear, older than the plantation, went still, like a pond freezing over. Aurelia grabbed a fistful of her hair. The first cut sounded loud as a bone snapping. Gasps and laughter filled the room. Another cut, and another. Aurelia ripped through the braids like she was cutting down a field. Laya stared straight ahead. She didn't fight. She didn't whimper. She only watched a spot on the far wall, the framed portrait of Aurelia's mother, a stern, cold-eyed woman whose gaze seemed to follow the scene with disapproval. The room buzzed with vicious delight. "Look at her face," someone shouted. "She looks like a plucked chicken." Aurelia wiped sweat from her brow, breathing hard from the effort. "No more pride, huh?" She lifted a final curl and let it fall. There, now she's what she was born to be. The floor was littered with dark coiled hair. Laya's shoulders felt bare, exposed. Her scalp burned from the pulling, but inside she felt nothing. Nothing but a strange rising quiet. Aurelia snapped her fingers. "Laya, look at me." Laya lifted her chin. Their eyes locked. Aurelia expected tears, shame, begging. She got none of those. Instead, Laya smiled. It was small, soft, but it held something ancient, something that did not belong to a girl who had been beaten, broken, and mocked. A shiver moved through the room. Even Aurelia faltered. "What are you smiling at?" Aurelia snapped. Laya's voice came out steady, almost gentle. "Hair grows back, ma'am." Aurelia's lips curled. "Not that fast." Laya's smile did not fade. "No, but curses do." The room went silent. A candle flickered. Someone's glass clinked. The air tightened as if the house itself listened. Aurelia shoved Laya away. "Get out of my sight." Laya walked calmly to the servant doors, her bare scalp glistening under the light. Behind her, Aurelia laughed again, forcing the party back into noise, but she didn't laugh as loudly. Her voice shook just a little, because when Laya left the room, the candles nearest Aurelia flickered out all at once. A hush fell. A guest muttered, "Strange, no draft." Aurelia felt a cold prickle at the back of her neck, but she brushed it aside. It was only hair, only a girl. She had no idea what she had awakened. Aurelia Beaumont rose late the next morning. Silk sheets tangled around her legs, the faint throb of last night's wine humming behind her eyes. She stretched lazily, expecting the usual ritual. A maid knocking timidly, warm water brought in brass basins, a silver-backed brush set beside her vanity to tame her thick golden curls. But the knock never came. Aurelia frowned. "Clara?" Silence. She sat up, irritated. The house felt unusually quiet, not bustling with servants, not humming with kitchen sounds, not alive with the normal orchestration of a plantation morning. The air was heavy, unmoving, as though the mansion itself held its breath. Finally, she rang the bell on her bedside table, sharp and impatient. No footsteps followed. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, throwing back the covers and sliding out of bed. Her bare feet touched the wooden floor. It felt strangely cold. She walked to her vanity, prepared to summon hell on whichever girl failed her duties this time. But as she approached the mirror, she froze. Her silver brush sat waiting, her combs, her pins, but her hair, not arranged, not brushed, not pinned, looked wrong. Aurelia leaned closer to the mirror. A cold, sharp breath left her throat. It wasn't just tangled or flattened or frizzy. It was patchy, missing in places. Whole sections thinned as though handfuls had been ripped out in the night. "No, no!" She grabbed a fistful of hair and felt her scalp sting. Strands came loose between her fingers, long golden strands falling like wilted petals onto the vanity. Her heartbeat skittered. This is impossible." She scrambled to the mirror again, examining her scalp. The missing patches were small but unmistakable, like bites taken out of a field. Clara must have done something, or some servant was playing a cruel prank, or... Aurelia blinked, and the memory of last night flashed through her mind. Laya standing in the parlor, her hair falling to the ground, her eyes calm as still water, and her voice quiet but cutting. "Hair grows back, ma'am, but curses do." Aurelia shook her head violently. "It's nonsense," she muttered. "Just a stupid girl trying to sound clever." But as she rose from the vanity, another clump of hair slipped free, drifting down her shoulder. Her breath hitched. Her fingers began trembling. She rushed out of her bedroom, storming down the hall. "Clara, where is that useless girl?" At the end of the hallway, Clara finally appeared, pale, sweaty, wide-eyed, clutching a broom. I was coming, ma'am. Sorry, ma'am." Aurelia seized her by the wrist. "What happened to my hair?" Clara's eyes flicked toward Aurelia's scalp and widened in horror. "Oh, Lord," Clara whispered. "Mistress, I ain't done nothing. I swear on my life." Aurelia yanked her closer. "Then who did?" Clara swallowed hard, throat trite. "Well, the other girl's been whispering since dawn. About, about Laya." Aurelia's grip tightened. "What about her?" "She was seen at the graveyard before sunrise, real early, on her knees, burying something." Aurelia scoffed, though her stomach turned. "Burying what?" "Her hair," Clara said softly. "All of it. And folks say she was talking, chanting something." Aurelia slapped the broom from Clara's hand. Superstitious nonsense. But Clara didn't flinch from Aurelia's anger. She only stared at the thinning hair with genuine fear. "Mistress, maybe you should stay inside today."
You don't look well." Aurelia's face burned with embarrassment. "I look fine. Fetch the doctor and find Laya." Clara hesitated. "Ma'am, Laya ain't in her cabin." Aurelia paused mid-step. "What do you mean? She's not in her cabin. She was gone before the sun came up. No one knows where." A chill prickled Aurelia's skin. Not from fear, she refused to admit fear, but from the sensation of something slipping out of her control, something she had underestimated. She pushed past Clara. "Get the carriage ready. I'll deal with this myself." Clara didn't move. Aurelia turned slowly. "Did you not hear me?" Clara's voice came out in a whisper. "Ma'am, you don't want to go out there." Aurelia's patience snapped. "Why?" Clara pointed a shaking finger toward the window. Aurelia followed her gaze. Out in the yard, workers had gathered in nervous little clumps. Overseers muttered. Even the horses in the stable seemed uneasy, stamping at the dirt. But that wasn't what made Aurelia's breath catch. It was the tree. The old pecan tree near the edge of the property. Its trunk carved with initials from generations of Beaumonts, had always been lush, dense, full. Now half its leaves were gone, stripped clean like hair torn from a scalp. Aurelia stepped backward. "No, this is a coincidence." But as she moved, another small lock of her own hair slipped loose, falling silently to the floor. Clara whispered, "It's her, ma'am." Aurelia clenched her jaw. "Laya is a slave girl, nothing more." Clara lowered her eyes. But Aurelia noticed the way her hands shook, the way her breath quivered, the way everyone on the plantation seemed to tremble beneath an unseen wind. Aurelia set her shoulders, gathering whatever dignity she had left. "Find her," she commanded, "before sundown." But somewhere deep in her bones, in a place she refused to name, Aurelia felt something else. The day would end, sundown would come, but the search would not matter because Laya wasn't hiding. She was waiting. The search party returned by dusk, empty-handed and pale from more than heat. Aurelia watched from the veranda, arms crossed tightly against her chest, hair pinned in a desperate attempt to hide the thinning patches. But the pins slipped, the strands fell, and each time they did, a murmur rippled through the workers watching her. Someone whispered, "It's starting." Aurelia ignored them. When the overseer, Briggs, stepped forward, she snapped. "Well," Briggs wiped sweat from his brow. "We checked every cabin, the fields, the creek. Ain't no trace of her." "You incompetent fool," Aurelia spat. "A girl with nothing but a dress disappeared on my land?" Briggs swallowed hard. "Ma'am, this ain't like other runaways." Aurelia glared. "Explain." Briggs hesitated. "You know that old church down by the marsh, the one Reverend Caldwell used to preach in? We found it open, doors wide, dust all disturbed. And, she demanded. "Someone lit all them candles," he shuddered, "all 36. A cold ripple slid down Aurelia's spine. The old church hadn't been touched in years. Before she could speak, a breeze drifted through the yard, gentle at first, then stronger. The pecan tree rustled violently despite the calm sky. Leaves fell in clumps. Workers backed away. Aurelia forced her voice steady. "Move aside." She walked down from the veranda toward the yard, ignoring Clara's soft plea for her to stay inside. Every eye followed her, some with pity, most with dread. She didn't get 10 steps before the plantation's iron bell tower rattled. Aurelia stopped. The bell sat still, unmoving, but the rope swayed. No wind touched it. Then the bell rang, loud, sharp, echoing across the fields. Clang. Aurelia froze. Who is in the tower?" Briggs shook his head. "Nobody climbed up, ma'am. I'd have seen." Another ring. Clang. Workers began crossing themselves. Clara whispered, "Lord, protect us." Aurelia clenched her fists. "Do not indulge superstition. Someone is doing this to frighten us, and I will not be." The bell rang a third time, then a fourth, faster, louder, like a frantic heartbeat. Aurelia's voice died in her throat. Then, through the ringing, a sound cut across the yard, a hum, soft, female, slow, a lullaby. The hair on Aurelia's arms rose. Clara gasped, "Ma'am, that's Lia's hum." The ringing stopped. Silence thickened the air. Then, faint but unmistakable, the humming shifted, low, rising, circling the plantation as though drifting on an invisible current. Aurelia staggered a step back. "No, this is a trick." But Briggs was shaking. "Ma'am, that girl ain't hummed a tune since the day her mama died. Everybody knows that." Aurelia tried to swallow, but her throat felt clotted with cotton. "Find that tower. Find who's up there." Briggs didn't move. Nobody did. The humming grew louder now. Behind them, workers turned. The sound slid along the wind like a whisper down a hallway. Aurelia felt her scalp prickle as though fingers were stroking it. She grabbed the nearest worker, lantern, now. The woman, hands trembling, handed her one. Aurelia marched toward the bell tower, chin high, despite the hollow pounding of her heart. Each step felt heavier than the last. The air thickened, humid and cold at the same time. Reaching the base of the tower, she held the lantern high. Nobody. No footprints in the dust. The rope swayed gently, then stilled. Behind her, someone screamed. Aurelia spun. Clara stood frozen in horror, staring at the ground near Aurelia's feet. Aurelia lowered her lantern. Her breath seized. There, in the dirt, lay a braid, Lia's braid, perfectly, like a snake waiting to strike. But the ends, clean where Aurelia had cut them, looked freshly severed, as though the cut had happened moments ago. And next to it, a clump of Aurelia's own golden hair, root and all. "No," Aurelia whispered, stumbling back. "That's impossible." Clara's voice shook. "Ma'am, she's leaving pieces, like warnings." Aurelia clutched her head instinctively. Another small patch of her hair loosened, sliding between her fingers. The humming swelled again, closer, circling, almost playful. Aurelia snapped, "Enough of this! I refuse!" The lantern flickered violently, then went out. Darkness swallowed them. Someone sobbed. Another dropped their hoe and ran. Panic rippled through the yard. Aurelia spun wildly, unable to see. "Light!" she screamed. "Bring me—" But before she finished, every lantern on the property, dozens of them, flared to life all at once, bright, white, blinding. And every flame leaned in the same direction, toward the forest, as though pointing. Aurelia gasped softly. Clara whispered, "She's calling you, ma'am." Aurelia's voice broke just slightly. She wouldn't dare." But the truth settled coldly in her bones. Lia dared, and more. She wanted Aurelia to follow. She wanted Aurelia alone. The humming drifted again, softer, coaxing, pulling, into the dark fringe of the woods. Aurelia swallowed her fear, tightened her robe, and lifted her chin. "Fetch Briggs," she said, "and torches." Briggs didn't reply. He just stared at her scalp. Her newest bald patch glistened in the lantern glow. Aurelia hissed, "Do you hear me?" But even as she spoke, she knew. Whether he followed or not, whether the workers scattered, whether the night swallowed them whole, she would have to enter those woods. Because Laia wasn't hiding, Laia was hunting. The moment Aurelia stepped beneath the first arch of cypress limbs, the forest swallowed the last sound of the plantation behind her. No lantern light reached this deep. Even the sky seemed locked out by the canopy. She held her own torch rigidly in front of her, its flame trembling like a frightened heartbeat. Briggs followed a few paces behind. 2 field hands came reluctantly after him. No one else dared. The farther they went, the more the air thickened. Cicadas quieted, crickets hushed, even the wind died. Aurelia whispered, "She couldn't have come this way. The girl is barefoot." Briggs muttered back, "Ma'am, some say spirits ain't need feet." Aurelia whipped around. "She is not a spirit." But the words tasted weaker than she meant them to. She turned again and kept walking. After several minutes, the path grew narrower, almost too narrow for Aurelia's skirts to pass. The trees seemed to bend inward behind them as they moved, as though closing, sealing, erasing the way out. Briggs noticed first. "Ma'am, look behind you." Aurelia turned. Where the trail had been moments before, the underbrush had surged back, branches knitting like fingers. There was no path now, only dense, dark forest.
The enslaved people called it the mirror moon, a night when truth shone on everything, even on those who tried to hide behind power. Adira had waited for this night. All day she had watched Mrs. Holston pace with irritation, snapping at servants, scratching absent-mindedly at a non-existent itch on her scalp. Her confidence had begun to crack. The woman who once mocked Adira openly now avoided meeting her eyes. Fear, Adira knew, was like rot. It spread quietly, hollowing a person from within. By dusk, the plantation buzzed with tension. The slaves felt it. The animals felt it. Even the wind felt wrong, drifting in uneasy spirals rather than straight lines. Adira sat outside her cabin, sharpening the razor again and again on a flat stone. She didn't need it sharp. She needed the movement, the sound, a rhythm to steady the storm inside her. When the church bell struck 9, Adira arose. She walked toward the big house, silent and deliberate, her bare feet whispering across the dirt path. No one stopped her. They watched her instead, with hope, with fear, with unspoken prayers. Inside the mansion, a lantern burned low in the hallway. Mrs. Holston had locked herself in her bedroom hours earlier, muttering something about crawling sensations and shadows in the corners. The whispers had spread. She was seeing things, hearing things, feeling things that were not there. Adira smiled. Good. The door to the mistress's room cracked open before she even touched it. Mrs. Holston stood inside, trembling, her once perfect curls gone, now broken, thin, almost frail. "You," she hissed when she saw Adira, "you did this. I know you did something to me." Adira stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "You cut my hair for sport," she said softly, "but hair grows back. Pride doesn't." Mrs. Holston tried to speak, but her breath hitched. She stumbled back, clutching her head. "It's falling out, all of it, every time I touch it." Adira walked slowly, her expression calm. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small pouch. Inside lay what looked like dried herbs, ordinary to anyone else. But Mrs. Holston recoiled as if it were poison. "What is that?" she whispered. "A mirror," Adira answered. "A reflection of what you gave me." Mrs. Holston pressed herself against the wall. "You'll leave this house now. I'll have my husband punish you." Adira cut her off with one raised finger.
"Your husband," she said, "has been drinking himself sick since morning. He didn't even notice your hair coming out in clumps. He won't hear you tonight." Mrs. Holston's eyes filled with panic. Adira stepped forward and offered her the pouch. "Open it." I can't." "You can." Hands trembling violently, Mrs. Holston opened the pouch. A gust of cold air blew across the room, as if the walls themselves exhaled. She looked inside and screamed. Inside the pouch was her own hair, all of it, every curl, every strand, gathered, bound, returned. The same hair she had cut off Adira's head now lay before her in perfect mockery. Mrs. Holston dropped it instantly. "How? How did you?" "Mirror moon," Adira murmured. "Tonight, things go back to their rightful owners." The mistress backed away until her legs hit the bed frame. She collapsed onto the mattress, shaking uncontrollably. "Please, I didn't know. I was only—" "It was only cruelty," Adira finished for her. "Nothing more." Mrs. Holston sobbed openly now, her face streaked with terror. "What do you want? Tell me. Money? Freedom? My husband can—" "I want you," Adira said, leaning closer, "to look at yourself." She lifted the silver mirror from the bedside table, the same mirror Mrs. Holston had held while laughing as she cut Adira's hair. She placed it in the woman's trembling hands. Mrs. Holston hesitated. Then she raised the mirror. She screamed. Her hair had not merely thinned, it had vanished completely.
Her scalp shone like polished ivory, smooth, pale, and utterly bare. A perfect reflection of the cruelty she had inflicted. Adira stepped back, satisfied, not with revenge, but with justice. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "everyone on this plantation will see you as you have always been." Mrs. Holston curled into herself, trembling violently, the mirror still clutched in a white-knuckled grip. Adira walked out of the room without another word. As she stepped outside, the mirror moon glowed brighter, illuminating her newly regrown hair. Still uneven, still short, but undeniably hers. The wind shifted, and for the first time in years, it carried no bitterness for her, only promise. Dawn crept over Holston Plantation slowly, as if unsure whether it was safe to rise. The fields glowed gold, the cabins warmed in the light, and the wind carried the usual morning sounds, rustling corn, birds waking, distant cattle calls. But there was something else in the air, too, anticipation or dread, depending on who you were. The enslaved people stirred quietly, exchanging glances. Word had already spread. People whispered as they swept the yards or stoked their cooking fires. "Something bad happened in the big house. Mistress been screaming all night. The mirror moon changed something." Adira heard them, but she kept her expression neutral, tending to a small pot of herbal tea outside her cabin. Her hair, still short, curled gently in the morning humidity. Every breath she took felt lighter, freer. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had reclaimed something much more powerful. Around mid-morning, the front door of the mansion creaked open. Every voice fell silent. Mrs. Holston stepped out, or rather the ghost of who she once was. Her dress was buttoned crookedly, her eyes were swollen from crying, and her scalp, smooth, pale, and gleaming in the sun, was uncovered for all to see. No hat, no shawl, no attempt to hide what she now knew could not be hidden. She looked like a woman stripped bare by her own wickedness. A hush rippled across the yard. The enslaved people stared, not with mockery, but with the stunned recognition of justice they never expected to witness. Mrs. Holston wrapped her arms around herself protectively. She scanned the faces around her, searching for someone to blame, someone to punish, someone to hurt. But the eyes staring back at her were not afraid today. Her gaze finally locked onto Adira, who stood still, cup of tea in hand, calm as a morning lake. Mrs. Hostin stiffened. Then, without warning, she stormed down the steps and marched straight toward her. The plantation workers tensed. A few took unconsciously protective steps closer to Adira. But Adira remained where she was, unmoving, unbothered. When Mrs. Hostin reached her, she hissed under her breath, "What did you do to me?" Adira looked up slowly, met her eyes, and answered truthfully, "I showed you yourself." Mrs. Hostin trembled so hard her jaw clenched. My hair was my pride, my beauty, and now look at me." "You cut my hair for amusement," Adira said softly. "It was only fair the world saw you without the shield you used to hide behind." Mrs. Hostin's breath shook with rage, or embarrassment, or some tangled mix of both. You ruined me." Adira tilted her head. "No, you ruined yourself. I only returned what you gave." For a moment, Mrs. Hostin's face crumpled. Something like realization flickered in her eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Fix it," she demanded suddenly. "Make it grow back. I know you did something. Make it undo itself." Adira rose slowly from her stool. "Hair grows only with kindness and time, neither of which you've offered anyone." Mrs. Hostin's lips parted in outrage, but before she could spit another command, Mr. Hostin staggered onto the porch, his shirt half-buttoned, his boots mismatched, his face red with drink. "Woman," he slurred, rubbing his eyes, "why in God's name do you look like that?" Mrs. Hostin's embarrassment deepened into panic. "Darling, this isn't my fault. Someone did this to me." He stared at her bald head, blinked twice, then burst into laughter. Harsh, loud, ugly laughter that echoed across the yard. The slaves looked away, unable to hide their smiles. Mrs. Hostin's face twisted in shame. "Stop laughing!" she shrieked at her husband. But he didn't. He laughed harder, doubling over, holding his stomach. "Lord have mercy, you look like a plucked chick."
"Anne!" Mrs. Holston's eyes filled with frantic tears. She stumbled backward, covering her scalp with trembling hands. But there was no hat, no scarf, nothing to save her now. Adira watched quietly, not with joy, but with an ancient calm, the kind that comes from seeing a balance restored. Mrs. Holston finally ran, literally ran, back into the house, slamming the door behind her. Silence settled over the plantation. Mr. Holston wiped his eyes, still chuckling as he wandered toward the barn. The enslaved workers dispersed, pretending to resume their chores, though everyone knew nothing on earth could restore normalcy today. Adira sat back down and lifted her tea again. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Not as a servant, not as property, but as power, a quiet, steady power that didn't need fury to be felt. The mirror moon had given her closure. The rest would unfold in its own time. The next days passed like heavy clouds, slow, muted, expectant. Mrs. Holston no longer came out of the house, not for meals, not for chores she once performed simply to exert control. Not even to bark orders from the porch as she used to every morning. The big house felt like a wounded beast, its windows shuttered, its halls silent. For the enslaved people, it was the first time they could breathe freely near it. Mr. Holston did little to fill the void. If anything, he drank more, wandered more, and paid even less attention to his wife's unraveling. The sight of her bald head and the memory of his own cruel laughter seemed to shame him, though he would never say so aloud. Instead, he avoided her entirely. But avoiding her was impossible for one person, Clara, the housemaid. She was sent inside each day to carry meals up to the mistress's bedroom.
When she returned to the cabins each evening, she walked with a strange tight posture, as if she were forcing every bone in her spine to remain straight. On the fourth evening, Adira approached her. "Clara," she said quietly, "you look troubled." Clara pressed her lips together. "Mistress ain't well." "Not surprising," Adira replied calmly. Clara shook her head. "No, Adira. I mean, she ain't right in the mind." Adira's hand stilled. Clara lowered her voice to a whisper. "She's talking to the mirror." That sent a ripple down Adira's spine, not fear, but understanding. "Which mirror?" Adira asked, though she already knew. "The little one," Clara replied. "The one from your room, the one she took after she cut your hair." "Ah, of course." Clara swallowed. "She keeps staring at it, crying some, screaming some, saying she sees things that ain't there." "What things?" Clara hesitated. "Her reflection. But not as she is now. She says she sees herself the way she looked when she cut your hair, smiling, laughing, mocking her." Adira felt the weight of those words settle over her like a cloak. The mirror moon did not simply restore balance, it revealed truths. Mrs. Holston had to confront the ugliness she carried inside. The very cruelty she once wore like a crown now tormented her when she looked at her own face. Clara glanced back toward the house. "She won't sleep, won't eat, keeps begging the mirror to stop." Adira placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did right telling me." Clara nodded shakily. "I'm scared she gon' blame us all. She already blaming you." "That is to be expected." "Should we do something?" Clara whispered. Adira inhaled slowly, feeling the humid night air fill her lungs. "There is nothing to do. The mirror shows only what is already there." Clara's eyes widened, fear flickering through them. "She say your name, Adira, over and over." Adira's expression did not change, but her voice softened. "Let her. Her anger cannot touch me anymore." Clara exhaled, relieved but uncertain, and walked back to her cabin. Adira remained outside, looking up at the sky. A sliver of the moon peeked through drifting clouds, not yet full, not yet ready, but glowing all the same. The mirror moon was not done. The next morning arrived with screaming. Mrs. Holston's shrill, ragged voice tore through the walls of the mansion and across the plantation grounds. Every worker froze mid-movement. Birds scattered. Even the wind seemed to halt. Mr. Holston cursed loudly from his drunken sprawl on the sofa and stumbled upstairs. Minutes later he stormed back down, face pale, voice trembling. "She smashed at the damn mirror," he shouted to no one in particular. "Smashed it to pieces, cut her own hands up doing it."
The slaves kept their eyes down, but their ears open. "She's mad," he muttered, gripping his head. "God above, she's gone mad." He staggered out of the house, yelling for the doctor. But Adira did not move. Her heart did not race. Her breath did not quicken. She knew this was not madness. It was consequence. A few hours later, the doctor arrived, entered the house, and came out looking weary and confused. "Your wife is not herself, Mr. Holston. She's delirious, frightened, says she is haunted by her own face." Mr. Holston rubbed his temples. "Can you fix it?" "She needs rest and perhaps kindness." Mr. Holston scoffed bitterly. "Kindness? From who?" The doctor did not respond. When he left, Clara slipped quietly into the kitchen to resume her work. Adira intercepted her. "Is she still talking to the mirror?" Adira asked. Clara swallowed. "There ain't no mirror left, but she talking to the wall now, like she's still seeing something there." Adira nodded once. Not satisfaction, not revenge, only resolution. Clara hesitated. "Will she ever get better?" Adira looked past Clara to the shutters of the mistress's room, dark, sealed, suffocating. "No, because she does not wish to be better, only to be unburdened. And she can't be, not until she faces herself." Clara shivered. That night, the plantation fell into an eerie quiet. No orders, no threats, no footsteps pacing the upper floor. Only a heavy, watchful silence.
As Adira lay in her cot, she felt the moonlight filtering through the window, brushing her face like a cool hand. She closed her eyes and let its calm sink into her. The mirror had shown Mrs. Holston a truth she could not bear, and unlike Adira, who had endured her pain, survived it, and risen from it, Mrs. Holston had nothing inside her strong enough to face her own reflection. The balance had shifted, not with blood, not with violence, but with revelation. And revelation could be far more powerful and far more terrifying than any blade. Years passed, and the Holston plantation faded into the sort of memory people whispered about rather than wrote down. Some said the mistress went mad because of illness. Others said the house was cursed. A few swore that the land itself rejected her cruelty. No one ever spoke the full truth, not because it was unbelievable, but because it was too simple. A woman had simply been forced to look at herself. Mrs. Holston never recovered. The shattered remains of the mirror were swept away, but it didn't matter. She kept seeing her old reflection in every polished surface: the window, the kettle, the side of a silver spoon. She would scream and claw at her face until her husband locked her in her room for her own safety and perhaps for his comfort. The plantation slowed to a crawl under her absence. Workers were permitted to keep to their duties without being watched. Mr. Holston, who never had much interest in running anything but his liquor stores, mostly stayed drunk enough to forget his wife's sufferings. In time, he sent her away. Some said it was to a sanitarium. Others said she wandered into the woods and never returned. Mr. Holston offered no explanation, only silence. And just like that, the woman who once strutted across the yard with scissors in hand vanished like a bad dream. But Adira remained. She lived each day with a quiet steadiness that unsettled those unused to seeing dignity in a slave. She no longer had to hide her strength. She no longer bowed her head when spoken to. There was a gentleness to her now, one that came not from submission, but from certainty. The hair she had lost grew back in thick coils that framed her face like a crown. People on the plantation said it suited her, that she looked like someone marked by something divine. She never confirmed or denied it. She simply lived. Clara became her closest friend, trusting her for guidance and comfort. The others learned to seek Adira too. When a child had a fever, when someone had a nightmare, when food was scarce, when hope was thin, they whispered that she carried the mirror moon's blessing in her palms, that her touch brought clarity, that her words held weight, not magic exactly, but something that felt like it. Under her quiet influence, the slaves grew bolder, more united, more certain that their suffering was not eternal. And though she never spoke of the mistress's downfall, everyone knew Adira had something to do with it. The land changed too. The big house, once an ever-watchful presence, began to decay. Paint peeled, the porch sagged. The sound of a voice barking orders no longer echoed across the fields. With the mistress gone and the master uninterested, the plantation felt less like a prison and more like a waiting place, its purpose dissolving. Then the war rumors began. Whispers of Union soldiers marching south. Whispers of emancipation. Whispers of a world cracking open. When the first distant booms of cannon fire rolled across the horizon months later, Adira stood outside her cabin, the wind carrying the smell of something powerful: smoke, iron, and change. Clara ran to her side. "Is this it?" she asked breathlessly. Adira nodded, her gaze steady. "The world is shifting, and us, we shift with it." Freedom did not come overnight, but it came. Some left the plantation as soon as the last Confederate flag fell. Others stayed long enough to gather strength, supplies, and family. Adira waited longer than most. Not because she feared leaving, but because she wanted to make sure every last enslaved soul who wished to go had the courage to do so. She was the final one to step beyond the gates. Clara walked beside her. They did not look back, but if they had, they would have seen something remarkable. The window of the mistress's old room, where for years she had tormented others and eventually herself, had cracked through the center. Time, weather, and neglect had broken it into a spiderweb pattern. And if someone happened to glance at it in the moonlight just right, they might swear they saw not the house behind it, but a woman's reflection. Not Mrs. Holston's, Adira's, calm, unbroken, unafraid, a reminder not of revenge, but of the truth the mirror had always held. Cruelty destroys itself. Dignity survives. And somewhere far away, under a moon that glowed like polished silver, Adira walked into her new life, carrying nothing from the past except her own reflection. And that, at last, was enough.